So I found myself throwing stones together with most of the Palestinian kids at that time. And that brought me to 5 years in Israeli jails. We are the only ones that can convince the Israelis. So we need to change direction, behavior, strategies, narratives, language, everything, attitudes with the Israelis. Demilitarization should be parallel to de-radicalization, and de-radicalization is by the new narrative.
Can I add a fifth?
Yes.
A fifth D. I've even got a D. God, the divine.
Yeah.
We men of religion, we can think about this conflict in a very different way. We can override all our pain and override all of this.
The Jewish people have been able always during history to show enormous success. They have talent. If they are the chosen people, they are the chosen people. Sha'bullah al-Mukhtar also, we have it in the Quran. There is a reason. There is something they are able as a community, as a group, to achieve together that it's not easy for others to achieve.
You think you could get elected?
Well, me or somebody like me. I think yes, with the Palestinians. The way you like it, when you speak it to the Palestinians in a clear, confident way, they like it too, because they want to find a way out of their misery.
Hi everyone and welcome to an episode of Real Talk with Rabbi Rowe, having deep and important and impactful conversations with important, impactful people. And with me today, I'm joined and privileged to be joined by Samer Sinijlawi, who is a Palestinian activist and political figure, and somebody who really has a vision and determination for peace. We're going to hear about your story, and we're going to have a conversation today where we're not going to skirt over the difficult issues. We're going to talk about them as to how we can solve this 100-year conflict. But maybe, Samer, first of all, thank you so much for joining me over here.
Well, thank you, Rabbi, for inviting me. And I'm always happy, privileged, and honored to be here in the Aish Center in the Old City. It's an amazing place. I'm always happy to have some time with you, Rabbi. So thanks for inviting me.
A pleasure. So thank you for joining again. I know you're busy. I know you're traveling this week. You're all over the Middle East and you're working tirelessly to try to figure out a better future. But I think what's really interesting is, if I understand correctly from conversations we've had, you didn't always grow up feeling so peaceful about everything. I mean, maybe give a little bit of your background, your story, and your journey to where you got to today.
Well, I'm a Palestinian that was born here in the Old City 53 years ago, almost. And I am a Muslim Palestinian who, at his childhood, went to a Christian school. So I was starting my day in the Christian prayer, Bismillah wal Ibn wa Ruh wal Qudus. These were the norms of that church Christian school. And when I go home, I was accompanying my grandfather into proper Muslim pray in Al-Aqsa Mosque. And I was fine with everything around me. So when I saw Jews going to synagogues in my city, or Christian to churches, or Muslim to mosques, people speaking different languages, it was part of my identity. I felt this is whom we are together here in the Old City. And I think basically this is what the Old City is all about. Until the first Intifada erupted.
Right.
The first Intifada is the uprising on the 1987 when Palestinians went to streets, somehow in a peaceful way of demonstration. Yes, there was stone throwing, but that was the limit of violence. And then on the first days of the Intifada, I was a little bit surprised to see on the screen that apparently there is us and them. We are throwing stones with kufiya, and they are in uniforms and jibs, and suddenly the conflict invaded me from inside. And gave me the identity of the conflict. I think this applied to my generation on both sides. We both sides started saying us and them, and started more going down deep into the details of that conflict that at a certain point was not at all visible to us. So
You're
anyway,
at this age, how old are you?
I was almost 14 and a half,
Right.
something like this. So I found myself throwing stones together with most of the Palestinian kids at that time. And that brought me to 5 years in Israeli jails. It was between 1988 and 1993. I was released with Oslo Accords. And during that period of jail, I learned quite important things that have shaped my personality, Rabbi. First, I learned to be independent because suddenly there is no family that can take care of you. You need to take care of every detail in your life inside that room. And then you need to be part of the new society you are in, because even inside prison, there was some kind of organization. We had elections, by the way.
In prison?
In prison, and I was always elected as the speaker, the dover.
Right.
So I was in charge in communicating with the guards. That's how I learned my Hebrew. So I have like 5 years of intensive course in Hebrew. I can claim I have master's degree in Hebrew. And I learned also patience, because you cannot challenge time in a closed room. You need just to wait. And I started discovering the other side, because these talks between me and the guards, they are also the first phase of dialogue between me as the Palestinians and the Israelis. Okay, the Israeli at that time were the guards, but the guards also spent a lot of time in prison. They are almost half jailed with us. So you start knowing some names and faces and family stories and, stories about the neighborhoods, from where they come and what do they think and how do they see, and they give you news about what's happening outside. And you develop some kind of relation. And I continued this habit, Rabbi, of talking to the other side until today.
Wow.
So 38 years of continuous intensive dialogue. And I think this is the best investment in my life, because in such complicated, or let me be accurate, in such conflict that is seen as very complicated by many experts, the whole world, I discovered it is a naive conflict, but yet to really evaluate, understand this conflict, you need to see it in details in the eyes of the other side.
Right.
You cannot understand any conflict if you focus only to seeing it from one side. I can claim now I am not only an expert on Palestinian affairs, I am also maybe one of very few experts on Israeli affairs. And sometimes I tell the Israelis, my friends, trust me, I know you better than you know yourselves, because I speak to all of you, you don't speak to each other. We have seen this kind of split in opinions and ideologies, especially recently when there was serious discussion inside the Israeli society about the judicial reforms and other things, where there was deep split. And I can see that, when I go, for example, to Channel 14, which is a right-wing TV station in Israel, all my left-wing Israelis will start telling me, are you crazy? Why do you go there? You don't need to talk to these people. And when I go to Channel 13, for example, which is a left-wing TV station, my right-wing Israeli friends will tell me, are you losing your time with these people? The peace camp should be now in music. They don't exist. Don't lose your time. But I need to invest every minute talking to every Israeli who accepts to talk to me, because always, Rabbi, from 1967 until today, we are always one Israeli election away from any political development that we pursue, whether it is ceasefire in Gaza, whether it is two-state solution, whatever you want to achieve with the Israeli society, you can achieve it only when you convince 51% of the voters in any coming elections to vote for that option.
Right.
If it does not happen, nothing will help us.
Yeah. So maybe let's talk a little bit. I mean, I've also sat with different Palestinian activists over the years and tried to exactly as you say, understand the conflict from different perspectives. What did you discover? Like, you were looking at it one way and you saw another side. What would you say is, there's many, as you say, there's many complex factions and people, but
Yeah.
what would you say is the key shift for you?
Despite all the hard feelings we have in our hearts toward each other, I can understand these hard feelings because there was lots of pain, especially on the 7th of October and every day later with the war in Gaza. And despite that, maybe most Israelis think about Palestinians of hopeless case. They hate us. We will never have peace with them. All what they want is to destroy us, kill us. And despite the fact that most of the Palestinians think the same about Israelis, that they are only good into exercising military power over us and kill us, etc. I do believe that there is a strong common ground that bonds us, which is our joint humanity. Now, every reaction of each side towards the other has its own reasons. We need to understand the complexity of Israeli society that is still living under the shadows of the Holocaust in the early 90s, and Rabin was leading a process with the Palestinians that was bombed to death or shot to death by two major incidents: suicide attacks of Hamas, the bombings of the buses, but also the assassination of Prime Minister Rabin. And when the second intifada came, we, the Palestinians, have killed completely the peace camp in Israel by choices that we have resorted to, because this conflict can never be resolved by violence. We can win our independence only if we stop fighting Israel. This is the war that you can win only if you stop fighting.
Right.
Okay. Just if you stop fighting, you will be able to open the doors. Because this conflict is all around two words. From one side, from the Israeli side, it's security. And the Israelis will never allow a chance to be loose on their security. They cannot afford another catastrophe. They have learned it the hard way. It's not only the Holocaust. Their history was full of threats where they have accumulated the will to live in their own Jewish state and defend themselves, and they are not able, and they cannot allow themselves to compromise on their security. So security is the main issue. Okay, there is some ideology in the Israeli society, but I believe it is maybe maximum around 15%. 85% of the Israeli Jewish society, any resistance or not accepting or endorsing any political horizon now, including the two-state option, is based on security concerns. Simply. And the more we try to challenge that lack of security by using pressure, mainly violence, the more they become stubborn. The only way to allow them to open their minds to any political horizons is for us to stop this strategy of using violence and to resort from using pressure to persuade, from pressuring to persuade. If I am able to convince the Israelis that we are capable to understand their need of security, and when they see that we are serious, sincere, and honest in these efforts, all the dynamics of this conflict will change. There is no power on earth that can pressure the Israelis or push them to something they feel they will sacrifice their security. Nothing will help. And the only people on earth that can convince the Israelis is us, the Palestinians. It's not the Americans, not the Europeans, not the Emiratis. All these can be friends who can help. But we, the Palestinians, need to assume the responsibility of convincing the Israelis, and it comes with a plan. It does not, come as a gift from God.
This is very eye-opening, because I've looked at it as here are two peoples who both have strong claims to this land, who are going to be here whether we like it or not, who have been in conflict since at least 1920, who have narratives that have the other side as the aggressor. And one can debate endlessly, truth, this, that, and the other, but then have painful feelings to another. And you're standing here saying, which I think is the truth, that most Israelis are very comfortable in theory with the idea of with the responsibility to try and give dignity, rights, everything to Palestinians. But the biggest thing is fear. We're in a tiny physical strip of land where there's a very big sense of a nationalist desire to drive the Jews out. And the fear that if tomorrow Israel pulled out the West Bank, a day later, pro-Iranian people would be running into Tel Aviv, blowing the place up. And you've hit the nail on the head there. So yes, if somehow you're saying the Palestinians need to take responsibility to show the Israelis that it's safe to start opening up checkpoints, pulling back from areas, giving more rights, and eventually leading to a full political solution. How much support for your thinking is there in Palestinian society? And the reason I say this is because, in theory, the Palestinian Authority at some point has, some Palestinians feel they've been like stooges for Israel, arresting Hamas people, and then they stop doing it because of resistance and so on. So how realistic is it that A, somebody like you could get into power there, and B, is that most of Palestinian society would agree? I mean, a kid, I'm imagining growing up in a Palestinian area, grows up with stories of how we were tilling farms and fields for centuries, and then the Zionists turned up and threw us out our homes and put us in refugee camps, and these evil monsters that's how I'm sure the education system or just the narratives work. So how likely is it, that your sort of language is going to impact?
Social political change is a very tough mission. We have been suffering from lack of good political debate. The Palestinian factions, including all the PLO factions and my party Fatah, also that of Hamas, raised up the Palestinians on some kind of narrative that nobody is allowed to challenge it. And because there is lack of democracy, because there is no different media outlet that allow more public debate, because the academia in Palestine is so much controlled by the systems, by Hamas in Gaza, by the PA in the West Bank, education system include the media. There is no real parties that are challenging each other every 4 years in elections. In a way, the Palestinian is subject to certain narrative that is imposed on him, and he simply cannot see something else because nobody is showing him something else. But the moment you start bringing such ideas to debate, lots of Palestinians sign in. We have been led only in the last 100 years by 3 Palestinians, starting Haj Amin Hussein, and you know very well his choices. Then Arafat, me and you also have witnessed during our life his ups and downs. And Mahmoud Abbas, who is the catastrophe of the 3 of them, he's at the age of 90 now, and he still controls everything in our life and does not allow any margin of change. But if there will be a change, and I think change can be achieved also by elections, despite the fact that most of the international community, also the Israeli society, do not believe that a Palestinian election is smart to do. All of them, they link it to the results of the elections in 2006 when Hamas won that election. And they don't want to repeat, despite the fact that we have nothing to lose because, the most terrible regimes that can rule the Palestinians are currently existing. Abbas and Hamas, okay. They are the de facto regimes. So any election will challenge them.
Well,
Cannot result in something worse.
Well, it could.
What could be worse?
Hamas in the West Bank.
Well,
if we'd know there could be an election and you could be elected, I think every Israeli and every international person would say, let's do it tomorrow. Put pressure on Abbas to do it. I think most Israelis fear that the Muslim Brotherhood is powerful, it's organized. Hamas seems to have, I don't know if it's gained or lost popularity, but it's very popular in the West Bank. Islamic Jihad is very popular. Even if you won the election tomorrow, in 4 years' time, if there was another election, Qatar could pour billions in and they'll become more popular and they'll win. Egypt, when it had an election, the Muslim Brotherhood took over. So that's the fear.
But then Sisi took over with election.
Yes, militarily.
But then election.
Okay, and then there hasn't been one since.
Yeah.
In other words, that there is a sense of Muslim Brotherhoods do very well in one election, and then they take control and they try to make sure there isn't one. There's a serious risk they could take over the West Bank, and then you'd have Iran in the West Bank. You'd have Hamas. I mean, I spoke to a very strong supporter of the Israeli left, a big financer of the Israeli left after October 7th, and I said, let's suppose Oslo had gone well, and the West Bank was a Palestinian state, and at some point Hamas had taken over. Had they then won that election in 2006 and actually taken over the West Bank, October 7th wouldn't have been in some kibbutzim around Gaza. It would have been inside Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. And by October the 12th, there might have been 500,000 dead Israelis. But I'm pushing on this for a reason. I look at the West Bank and it sits on top of Tel Aviv. It sits on top of Jerusalem. We make a mistake there. Hamas gets in there. Islamic Jihad gets in there. And we're either looking at a slaughter of the Jews here or a war 20 times worse than what's happened in Gaza. So, yeah.
Well, you need to allow me take some time on answering this question.
Yeah.
From
you
different
get whatever
angles,
time.
because
Yeah.
I think this is very important.
Yes.
I think it's very important because unless we start with the Palestinian, the process of change, then we will not be able to facilitate the change on the Israeli side. The only way to trigger change on the Israeli side is to start a deep, serious change in the Palestinian side. Because I told you, we are the only ones that can convince the Israelis. So we need to change direction, behavior, strategies, narratives, language, everything, attitudes with the Israelis. Do you think that Gaza on the 6th of October is the same like Gaza today? Do you think that still there are Gazans who feel supportive to Hamas? I will tell you, Rabbi, and I am almost 2 or 3 days a week on a TikTok event live with Gazans, current Gazans under the war, hundreds of them each time. I know how they think. I know what's in their mind. I can tell you that the support of Hamas outside the framework of the 20,000 people on their payroll is zero in Gaza. Zero.
You would think it's that low?
Yeah, I'm sure of that.
There aren't clans that are affiliated to them.
There is nobody that affiliated with Hamas except those who are now benefiting directly from Hamas. Okay? And most of those who are benefiting directly from Hamas, they are benefiting out of no other choice. When there are alternatives, they will choose other alternatives. So I think it's easy to say, yes, there has been a change. Hamas has received a big hit in Gaza. And Gaza is 40% of the electrical power. Then if we go to the West Bank, can you think about a little bit of what was in the head of Sinwar on the 7th of October? There was that concept of the unified fronts. He thought that automatically what has happened in 2021, a war out of Gaza will initiate war in the West Bank, at the front in Lebanon, out of Syria and Iraq, Yemen, and also inside the Arab communities inside Israel. Everything he predicted happened. Hezbollah got involved. All the proxies of Iran in Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, and Yemen started launching rockets over Israel, but not the West Bank and not the Arab cities or neighborhoods in Israel. Why, Rabbi? Because not as in 2021. In 2021, we felt attached to the cause. It was a threat on Al-Aqsa. It was the issue of Sheikh Jarrah, that people and Hamas did not commit the atrocities that distance us from them. Okay, they launched rockets over Israel, but they did not kidnap babies. They did not kill elder women in their beds. These atrocities shocked the Palestinians, and we refuse to identify ourselves with it. That's why the West Bank is silent and quiet. And that's why there was no reaction inside the Israeli Arab communities. Maybe there was no clear condemnation to Hamas. Maybe it's only me that came to the envelope of Gaza and condemned in front of cameras the atrocities of Hamas. Maybe this was not popular, yes, but the people did not show support in a way of opening the front that could have changed the dynamics of the war. You can imagine, Rabbi, and you were accurate. The West Bank is so much overlapped on the borders of Israel, 5 minutes away from Netanya. If you see Jenin or Tulkarem, yes, I agree with you. Yes. But this front disappointed Hamas and did not explode.
There was a lot of action in the refugee camps of the West Bank. There may not have been a mass up. I know the Israeli Arab population didn't join, but also there were statistics like at the beginning that 80% of the West Bank supported October 7th. I'm just...
Well, let's leave polls.
Okay.
In reality,
yeah.
In reality, yes, there was individual military units, groups, cells that were activated by Hamas and Jihad Islami, including in refugee camps of Jenin and Tulkarem, but it was not the massive Palestinians going to streets.
Right.
It was not like a civil disobedience where hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands goes to street and try to challenge the whole system there. This did not happen.
And you think that was because I've met Palestinians who say to me, I mean, I haven't met many because it's difficult to have dialogue. When you do that, and I say to them, it's 80%, they're like, yeah, but in the West Bank, they don't believe the atrocities happened.
The polls that are trying to show certain tendencies in the Israeli society or certain tendencies in the Palestinian society during the 7th of October and the war, they are not accurate because they are testing people under trauma. Okay, confused a lot. Their temper, their anger is up to the maximum. Okay, so it's not very smart to test it. But always the questions of a poll are also important. For example, when you ask a Palestinian, are you pro or anti the 7th of October? The answer will be most probably pro by majority. Because it is interpreted as, are you in solidarity with Gaza? It is interpreted as, is your cause just? Okay? And you are totally correct. It's not interpreted with the atrocities of Hamas. Most of the Palestinians did not see that part of 7th of October, just like most of the Israelis did not see the human tragedy inside Gaza during the war. Okay, our media systems wasn't fair enough to show us what has happened to the other side and leave to us to decide whether we agree or don't agree. They just hide it, okay, in a way or another. But this has misled us on both sides to be more educated about what has happened because we could have a different opinion. It's up to us, maybe not. Okay, I don't come to conclusion that most of the Palestinians would have condemned Hamas or most of the Israelis would have criticized the army operation. Okay, it's not necessary, but it could have allowed a different opinion by individuals or by percentage of the site. And on this, Rabbi, I have done some exercises. I've done it several times. I went to universities and I asked several tables in cafeterias of universities to convene together and to
These are universities in the West Bank?
In the West Bank,
right, okay.
Yes. So in one time, I remember 26 students came 4 tables together and I asked them 4 questions. Question number 1, are you supporting the 7th of October? 25 of the 26 said yes. My second question was, do you support kidnapping, killing elder women, babies, kids, civilians from their beds in that morning? 23 said no. So what is the 7th of October? When you start linking the 7th of October to the atrocities of Hamas, any human being cannot identify himself to that day. Okay? So they say no. But now they started to have an image of what is the 7th of October. My second question. My third question was, do you support using violence against Israelis? 24 said yes. My fourth question was, will you be ready to pick up a gun and use violence against Israelis? 25 said no. So what is it? I support violence against Israelis, but I don't want myself to take part in it. Let somebody else do it. It means that me as a human being, I don't see that this represents me. But I am angry. They hit us. I would like to see somebody hitting them back. This brings us back to the elections. And then from the elections, I would like to link it to the change that is needed in order that we can secure a proper, free, fair elections that is dramatically positive.
Right. But can I pause you?
Yeah.
The reason I asked that last question, the reason I think this is so important is because, and this now I need you to clarify. See, a few minutes ago, you made a very strong point that what Sinwar wanted to see happen didn't happen. Yes, there were rockets, there were fronts, but the big eruption from Israeli Arab society, the big eruption of the West Bank didn't happen. And I thought what you were saying, and I thought you said it, is because people were sick of what happened on October 7th. They didn't want to identify with it.
Yeah.
But then, now we've discussed the opinion polls and your own experience, that actually they're in denial or they don't associate the day with that. So it doesn't, and in fact, they do support the day until you point that out to people. So that sounds like the reason they didn't get into uprising is not because of the horrors of October 7th. Maybe in some parts of Israeli Arab society, maybe, for example, the Bedouin communities that experienced parts of it, that helped them not rise up. But the reason they didn't come running out of Jenin, I understand, is not because they thought October 7th was evil. What a lot of Israelis feel, it's because the IDF is around Jenin and quickly deployed there and went into the refugee camps and battled with the Islamic Jihad. And so, again, from an Israeli perspective, I think most Israelis would love to see checkpoints removed, IDF not have to be in there. But in their mind, if the IDF if it was an independent Palestinian state, if Israeli Arab communities didn't have Israeli police, then there is a fear that they would have joined in, that Hamas could have activated them much more easily.
The Palestinians did not understand in the first hour, just like the Israelis, what's happening on the 7th. It was maybe a successful military attack by Hamas that surprised everybody. Wow, did they really manage to penetrate that fence? Did they really defeat those Israeli army units? Are they really operating for hours and there is no Israeli? Everybody was in shock, was not understanding. And that's where the emotional moment came to the spirit of most of the Palestinians, that something serious happening there. What's happening? Okay, maybe it's a moment of victory. Maybe it's still confusion, you know. The confusion was also on the Israeli side, that still they were not allowed to. Where is the army? Why nobody is you know, there was a lot of dilemma on both sides. Then when the stories started coming out and the Palestinian was absorbing them, deep inside, every Palestinian knew that this is not representing him. Deep inside, what I have been saying in public could have been resident in the deep thinking of the Palestinian, of the average Palestinian, that this is not the way. I don't want to reach to a Palestinian state over the bodies of these kids or civilians. If this is the way, I want to stop it. I need to find some other way. But the general mood is still in support of Gaza. And with the lack of leadership that did not define what could be the proper Palestinian reaction to what has happened, the responsible, the moral, okay, the politically correct. Abbas did not open his mouth until recently. So the Palestinian was deep inside feeling there was wrongdoings. But on the surface, he cannot express his own thinking because the general mood was in a different way. Okay? So yes, you can see in Paul's support, I explain it, but at the same time, nobody went out of home. Nobody tried to show any kind of solidarity to Hamas. The solidarity were to the kids that were losing their lives in Gaza, but not to the Hamas operatives who have done the atrocities of the 7th of October. We have been witnessing and we have seen that in cases like the First Intifada, it's the same army, it's the same Shabak, it's the same police who lost control. They simply couldn't put this down for years. We could have faced something similar if the Palestinians felt that there is a source of pride they can identify themselves to and what Hamas has done. Sometimes I feel certain similar dilemma inside the Israeli society. For example, Rabbi, let me speak specifically on lots of friends from the left-wing camp that I know, reputable academics, journalists, politicians, retired generals, whom criticized a lot the war, not maybe in the first 6 months, but definitely in the last 6 months, when they thought that this war is all about giving a political lifeline to a certain political elite in Israel, mainly the prime minister, and that this war should stop. They were criticizing it loudly, but at the same time sending their kids and grandkids to the war. They have a lot of loyalty to the system, to the army that is the army of the people, and they don't want to challenge it, and they don't want to collapse it. So respecting that democracy while disagreeing with the policy of the guy that was elected to do it, while maybe sometimes some Israelis hate him and don't like what he's doing, they still need to serve him and serve his policies that they don't agree with. So there is a lot of dilemma separately for different background and different reasons that have erupted on both societies during this war. But this does not make neither side a bad human being. It is a human being that is, in a way, living certain circumstances that under certain policies that are beyond his control, that have been maybe more a victim of certain media, information, propaganda, ideology. There is a lot of elements that determine the action and reaction of every Palestinian and Israeli in this conflict. With all this complication, Rabbi, one man came and put this to an end, President Trump. And I think he has rescued us from these dilemmas. Yes, we need to make sure that Gaza will not be again what it has been on the 6th of October and 7th of October. We need this time to prove to the Israelis that we can create an entity there that can be friendly, cooperative, part of the Israeli security and part of the Israeli development and part of the Palestinian development, part of the Palestinian prosperity, part of the Palestinian success story. Do you think that the whole world cares about us, Palestinians? The only reason that we are important is that we are part of a conflict with the Israelis. The real importance is the Jewish question. It's not us. We are lucky to be in conflict with the Jewish people. We became important only because we are in a problem with you. You can imagine how much luckier we will be if this link is positive and not negative.
Can you elaborate on that? Because I think it's actually something very deep there, but explain what you just meant there by that.
Who cares about the Palestinians? All over the world.
You mean if they were in a conflict with the Syrians or the Sudanese, no one would care?
Larger number of Sudanese are killed by starvation and by other kind of conflict all over Africa, everywhere else. In Yemen there were issues. Nobody cared. The Palestinian issue became important. We, the Palestinians, became the focus of the world simply because you fell upon us, because we started to be in conflict with you. There is a value, a big value, a central value of the Jewish question in the humankind history.
What do you mean? What do you understand by the Jewish question?
Well, first of all, the Jewish people have been able always during history to show enormous success. They have talent. If they are the chosen people, they are the chosen people. Sha'bullah al-Mukhtar also, we have it in the Quran. There is a reason. There is something they are able as a community, as a group, to achieve together that it's not easy for others to achieve. But also there is the sense of guilt from humanity towards the Jews, because the Jews have passed a lot of catastrophes, massacres, the Holocaust. The whole world in its collective memory feels guilt to the way they have treated Jews in Europe and in other places. And they want to see the Jewish state stable. So it is a human demand. The globe, the international community wants this to happen. There is a lot of solidarity with the Jewish question. When the conflict has erupted between both of us, we also became important because of the importance of that question. Okay, I mean, we could have been a problem with the Jordanians and nobody cared. So, despite the fact of a negative engagement with the Israelis, we became important. You can imagine if we changed the dynamics and became partners to this Jewish people and to the state of Israel, the horizons that can open to us as a Palestinians. So we need to be smart and say, well, we are fighting them, we became important. If we work together with them, create common grounds and create common success story, this kind of interest and support from the world will be by 1,000 times more. Common sense, because then everybody will be happy that we are able to work things together and that we are able to find a way of coexistence, and we are able to change this catastrophe in the Middle East and open the horizons of stability, security, integration of Israel, integration of the Palestinian state, where the Palestinian state is no more a threat, where Gaza is no more a threat, it's an ally to Israel. The same that Egypt is an ally, the same that Emirates is an ally. And it has been proven, Rabbi, that we in the Middle East, we are either enemies up to the extreme or allies up to extreme. Take the example of Emirates.
I was going to say United Arab Emirates, yeah.
Take the example of Emirates. During the war, while there is enormous 100% solidarity to the Palestinians in Emirates, in every home. During the war, while Delta and American Airlines and United Airlines and British Airways and Lufthansa and Swiss Air stopped flying to Tel Aviv, the Emiratis quadrupled their flights. There was 16 flights a day between Tel Aviv, Dubai, and Abu Dhabi. Somehow it rescued the connection of Israel, at least to the east. Okay, because, it was only El Al that was flying on that day. During the war, I became a platinum member of El Al because, simply it's only El Al that is flying, and I was flying only El Al. So, and honestly, Rabbi, most of the Gazans during the war would wake up every day thanking God that the Abrahamic Accords happened before the 7th of October, because it's up to the Abrahamic Accords that Emirates was able to do a lot of humanitarian aid that rescued a lot of lives in Gaza. If the Emiratis did not have that strong diplomatic relation with Israel, where even Israel Bibi and Smotrich and Ben-Gvir couldn't say no to the Emiratis every time they wanted to enter human aids or place a field hospital or do airdrops or evacuate some injured kids to treatment in Emirates. $2 billion were spent by the Emiratis in Gaza for humanitarian aid during the war. So the Abraham Accord helped not only Israel, but also the Palestinians. So you can see a model of cooperation, a model of integration. And I can tell you, Rabbi, that there is a lot of similarity between the October 23 and November 25. In October 23, there hasn't been any problem of information. We all knew what Sinwar was planning for. He was speaking in public events. They organized TV series on the details of the 7th of October, and they were watching it. He built up mock-up of the surroundings of Gaza, of the military bases and the kibbutzim, and they were training on it. We knew about the tunnels, and he was always proud to say, I have hundreds of kilometers of tunnels. All the information and the indication in details of the 7th of October was offered to us. What we lacked is the imagination. We couldn't imagine that he's going to do it. Okay? Nobody could imagine that he's able to do it.
Yeah.
Today, there is a lot of information about the readiness of the region to endorse integrate Israel. The Prime Minister of Indonesia said it publicly in the UN. The Saudis, the MBS said it clearly during his visit to President Trump. The whole region says they want to change Israel from being a villa in the jungle to a villa in a very nice upscale neighborhood by integration, by opening the doors, where an Israeli can wake up in the morning, do his breakfast in Gaza and lunch in Beirut and his weekend in Riyadh, where suddenly Israel can imagine itself as part of the Middle East and not Europe, doing football in Abu Dhabi and in Damascus. Why do you need to go to Paris? The UEFA now says they want to block Israel. You can come to the Middle East.
The Middle East. Yeah.
Or doing the Eurovision, you can do it in the
Middle
Arab
Vision.
Idol. Come to the Arab Idol. Most of the Israeli music is Eastern, by the way.
Right.
Yeah, it's
Mizrahi.
Mizrahi. It's replica of Turkish,
Arabic,
Egyptian things, a combination of everything. We need to imagine it. There is a lack of imagination, and I think it's not utopia. The utopia, the fantasy, is not believing it. The realistic Israelis and Palestinians and Arabs should be able to see it, because this is their naturality. The borders of Israel are with Arab countries, not with the European countries, and it should be part of the Middle East.
So all this, when you say it's very deep and very resonant and very powerful, I'm sure anybody watching this is feeling this. And truth be told, I think, in even just reading biblical stories, there's a conflict between the children of Abraham, Yitzhak and Yishmael, in our story in Tanakh, in Torah. And for a long time, Yishmael felt displaced by Yitzhak. Yishmael was the resident, he was the elder, and Yitzhak comes along and he suddenly finds he's number two, he's out the home, and there's huge conflict. And at a certain point, Yitzhak takes responsibility and says, we have to take responsibility. And the whole family comes back together. After Sarah dies, the whole story, and they come together. And when it comes to the burial of Abraham in our sources, Yishmael, Yitzhak, they're brothers, they're both righteous, there's unity. And we look around at the Muslim world generally, and to a large degree the Arab world, to a large degree the Palestinian world, we shouldn't be in conflict. We serve the same God. We have a kinship. For most of our history, it was a lot better to be in Muslim countries than in Europe. There were problems, but there was, and the idea that we're sitting in conflict, fighting and having to die and kill, it's horrific. Of course, when you say this, of course we want this. But at the same time, how do we get there? And the reason I say this is I'd love to just float in a poetic vision together and just embrace and just, that's it. We wake up tomorrow and it's all there. But we do face a very difficult journey to get there, partly because Israel's, again, like I say, if it was a giant country and could take a risk giving up territory, that's one thing. If there wasn't a Muslim Brotherhood, then there are Muslims who believe that this whole land has to be caliphate land. And the fact that it's, you mentioned Hajj Amin al-Husseini, he believed this. He believed it cannot be non-Muslim control. There's a lot of people who believe that. A lot of people who are willing to fight and die and kill me and my family and have your family die for this to kick us out. So yes, the Saudis don't, but going back to this whole issue of the security of a tiny little Jewish people in this land and can't take the risk because the consequence of it going wrongly is unthinkable, and we want to get to the same vision. We want this vision. I think almost every Israeli, there might be a few fanatics who don't, but as you said, 85% easily of the Jewish people would jump up and down at the thought of this vision, if not 95 or 99%. How do we get there? And let's go into the Palestinian side. You've learned to think from the other side. Lots of Palestinians say these Israelis are monsters. You know, they've been watching Al Jazeera. Their vision of Gaza is, I don't want to describe, you know what it's like for a Palestinian child to grow up in the West Bank watching how they interpret. It's tragic enough how I look at it. It's a million times worse how they look at it. So what is the journey? You were mentioning before elections, you were mentioning things like this, but how do we get at it? How do we move things forward?
We need to start some changes as Palestinians. Why do I think we should start and initiate the change and then allow the Israelis also to react by certain step of change from their side? We need to start because I think currently, as it has been always, we are under a sense of urgency more than Israelis. While the Israelis are paying heavy price of this conflict, but yet they are enjoying a very nice country. Strong in economics, startup nation, OECD country, strong army, with a passport that connects them to the whole world almost with no visa. And they are still living a high quality life. We don't have all of that. We have 2 million people in plastic tents now in Gaza. So there is a sense of urgency. The Jewish people can stay another 80 years trying to manage the situation until they are comfortable, they can take some steps. We cannot wait another 80 hours. So we need to start the change. The change starts, Rabbi, with the narrative. The narrative is something that should be changed by both sides. Currently, there are two narratives fighting each other. And there should be a unified narrative which says, we Palestinians recognize the historical links of Jews to this land, but they have never been alone. There was always others, and these others are us. So we also have a link to this land. If the Israelis think about it and find it correct, we have eliminated 80% of the disagreement, the most heavy part of the disagreement. Because now the question is who belongs, who does not belong. Then the question will be how do we both belong. It will help us both. And it does not need a lot of effort, because you mentioned some stories from the Bible, from the Torah. I can show you the mirror of these stories in the Quran, especially in the biggest chapter in Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah. I was with a friend, Rabbi. He's from the Likud. We were driving. It was 1.5 hour drive each way. And there was a lot of discussion. He's a very close friend. And we were talking about in a recently discovered synagogue near Tveria in the north, where they used artificial intelligence to rebuild it. They scanned all the rocks,
Right.
and then the computer identified which rock should be where, and then it was built in a nice way. Okay, so it's very historical, very old synagogue. It shows the historical links of Jews in this land. And then my friend opened his mobile. He's religious, but he is not Haredi, so he's connected to internet. But he's Shomer Shabbat, and he cares that his daughters learn Judaism and etc. So he's a little bit like me. So we are modern, but a little bit religion is part of our identity. So he was reading to me stories from the Torah about how Abraham Abenu, that was the term that was used, insisted to buy the place where he wanted to bury his wife in Hebron. And they told him, you are a man of honor, you can take it for free. He said, no, I insist, I want to pay for it. When he was reading in Hebrew, and he said, Abraham Abenu, I felt that it is Abraham Abenu.
Abraham, our father, right? Yeah,
it's Abraham, our father. It is our father, because
Right.
he's our father. He's their father. He's our father, both of us. So I told him, Okay, if he bought it, then he bought it for both of us, because I mean, in a way, we are still inheritors of the same man. So when you can positively on the historical links, the religious connectivity of the land, you can see how much we are part of the story in a coexistence. There was 305,000 years of coexistence. Only the last 100 years went wrong. We can overcome, because by DNA, we are able to coexist. We have a confusion in the head now in the last 100 years that for so many reasons put us in a situation to face each other in a conflict that has no reason. That's why at the beginning I said it might look very complicated, but it is very naive for me. When you start seeing it in depth, it's just we are not able to think correctly. We are not able to have a narrative that bonds us together, and we are not able to find a language that we can listen to each other. We can correct all of these. Ironically, Rabbi, the collective memory of the Palestinians historically is linked to the seashore. It's Gaza, Ashkelon, Asqalan, Haifa, Jaffa. The historical collective memory of Jews is linked to the West Bank, the Judea, and Samaria. The two-state solution currently is giving each other, the other side's most important center of historical links. But again, there is nothing else we can do, which means we need to be smart in defining the two-state solution. And I can tell you what we should do very hard, both of us. The Israelis need to decide, and I think they need to decide now, whether they want annexation or separation. But they need to define. They cannot keep this question pending for long. Annexation is terrible because it will create either a one-state reality that unfortunately is not Jewish state. It will be a Palestinian state. The majority currently between the river and the sea is Palestinian. Or it will create a two-floor state where the Israelis are, the Jewish people are in the master's floor and the Palestinians are in the servant floor. And it is a big moral complicity that nobody wants. So the one state is very dangerous. I would like to see Israel becoming a definite, stable, long-term, eternal Jewish democratic state. And the only way is to separate from Palestinians. This is the only way to save that concept. And I recognize that need, respect that need, and I want to be part of that reality. There is a Jewish democratic eternal state of Israel. So the two-state solution is the only way to do that. But then we, the Palestinians, we need to take a very difficult decision, very difficult, to choose either the two-state solution or the right of return. We cannot do both. If I want a two-state solution, I need to redefine the right of return to be the right of return to the state of Palestine. Because I cannot convince the Jews to accept the two-state reality in order to protect an eternal Jewish democratic state, and then I will tell them I will flood you with 5 million Palestinian refugees. It doesn't make sense. Regardless what is the individual right or how the international law defines it. Sometimes a Palestinian leadership with agency need to sacrifice individual rights for the benefit of the collective. And this is one of the decisions. Okay, there should be compensation offered to the refugees. We should have the help of the whole international community, maybe also with Israel, to build up an economy and housing projects and schools and hospitals that can accommodate them. Maybe learn from the example and method of the Israeli Aliyah, how Israel was able to absorb these millions of Jews coming every year doing Aliyah to Israel. Maybe we can learn from that example and Israel can share it. We can do a collective work and the whole world finance it. We need to find a way for it. This two-state solution should not force any Jew to leave the territories of the state of Palestine. I can explain it and I can say why. Currently there are around 500, 600, 700,000 Israeli Jews living in the West Bank. Most of them, 80% of them is living very close to the green light, with a certain land swap, they will be permanently inside Israel. The last 20% are living in different areas. Now, because I have recognized that you have links to the land and that historically the center of that Jewish link is the West Bank itself. It's Hebron, it's Shechem, it's Beit El. Then I need to respect that some Jews will say, despite the two-state solution, I still feel that I belong to Hebron and I cannot practice my Judaism if I leave Hebron. This is the only way for me to be connected to my heritage and religion, and I want to stay here in Hebron. We should welcome that individual or those 20% to stay as Israeli citizens, resident of the state of Palestine, fully protected by the state of Palestine, equally in front of law, have all the privileges that any Palestinian citizen have, while they are always free to go, come on daily basis for work, for vacation, for temporary education, between where they live in the West Bank and their state, mother state, Israel. So we might end with another 20% minority of Jews, just like Israel is ending with another 20% minorities of Arabs. By this model, we can enable any Jew to be able to connect to whatever he feels home. And if a Palestinian have 40 million shekels and can buy a penthouse on the Yarkon Street facing the beaches of Tel Aviv, why not? Any French can do it, any British can do it. So in a way or another, we should allow this kind of respect and connection to the whole land, while there are clear borders and sovereignty and maintaining each state with its identity.
You're saying, in other words, a vision where people can really live wherever they want, from the river to the sea, but the citizens of two different political entities. Everything you're painting is great. My question is not, and I don't want to cut short the beauty of the vision of what you're portraying and the idea of living side by side, feeling as brothers, as whatever, exactly, cousins, however you want to relate to one another. I think, again, almost everyone would agree that this would be amazing. And almost everyone, I keep coming back to the same question, which is, okay, and I can paint another 3 or 4 very good visions. Yours might be the most practical, and you've thought about it for years and decades. What have we got to do to get there? That's what I keep coming back to. And
change of leadership, Rabbi. Starting the Palestinian leadership. Now, imagine if you have the Palestinian leader now officially elected, that has my vision and speaks it the way I speak it, as clear as is possible, and proves it indeed. Okay? Like he condemned the 7th of October. I visited Yarlin Bibas and asked for his pardon for killing his baby. If you have this kind of profile of Palestinian leader that was elected,
you think you could get elected?
Well, me or somebody like me. I think yes. On the Palestinians, the way you like it, when you speak it to the Palestinians in a clear, confident way, they like it too, because they want to find a way out of their misery on both sides. So let us say that we have done it. We have elected that leader, and he started conveying this message in words and in doings. Will the Israelis catch the signal and start working with it or no? I can tell you yes.
I think if they believe, if the leaders were doing that and that was coming across clearly, and they were changing the school system to, I think Israelis would be very responsive.
It's not only the school system. I'll tell you something, Rabbi. What is needed is changing the environment the way I see it, changing the narrative, speaking it in the most public, clear, and loud voice possible every day, everywhere, in every different language, in every platform possible. And make it as strategy of the Palestinian leadership, strategy of the system, have it the basis of our argument and national identity, rebirthing the Palestinians to start thinking in that way. Then we will have results in changing the education and the demilitarization, which is the focus of everybody now, is also not good enough. Focusing on one D. It should be a package of 4 Ds.
4 Ds.
4 Ds.
Okay.
The demilitarization is good, is wanted, is one of these Ds, but we need to ask ourselves a question. If 2 years did not demilitarize Hamas, what can demilitarize Hamas? I think defeating Hamas in election boxes and bringing a Palestinian leader that is more a Palestinian Ben Gurion, loyal to the state, building institutions, and using the Altalena option when needed, this could demilitarize Hamas. But demilitarization alone, which is dealing on collecting the weapon without handling the will to use it, which is de-radicalization, the second D, is not good enough. Demilitarization should be parallel to de-radicalization, and de-radicalization is by the new narrative.
So demilitarization, de-radicalization.
Democratization. There is no way I can sustain any kind of relation with Israel if I cannot be a liberal democracy. We have seen how the Israeli democracy is functioning. We adore it. We love it. We see how vibrant is the Israeli society.
Palestinians feel that way about Israel.
We were born under the military rule of Israel, but we have seen the other side of democracy in Israel. We have seen that how Ahmed al-Tibi chair a session in the Knesset and kick Ben-Gvir out of the Knesset. Do you think we don't like this kind of democracy system that is respecting everybody? When there are rules, there are rules. We have absorbed this, and we are able to create it.
Okay, so there's the 3. We've got demilitarization, de-radicalization, democratization.
And then development.
Development.
You need to protect all of these. And this is not a list to choose from. This is a comprehensive solution.
Package deal.
Development will protect everything else. When people have opportunities, motivation, good health, good education, good income, horizons, connectivity with the world, then the Palestinian will be so busy in lots of things, in culture, in sports, in commerce, in high tech, and the other side will be the partner.
Can I add a 5th?
Yes.
A 5th D. I've even got D. God, the divine.
Yeah.
I tell you what I think. I've noticed this a lot. I spoke to somebody who was involved in the Oslo Accord. So before Oslo, there was a small movement of imams, rabbis, people getting together, discussing religion. And when it came to Oslo, they were basically told, stay out of the room. You religious guys create the mess. We secularists are going to solve this. We've got the Norwegians, the Americans, we'll work it out. Because otherwise, if it's the secularists saying we want democracy and development, and the religious guys in the mosques are saying, no, this is the Quraysh tribe, we don't have to destroy them, they're the rebels against God, and on the other side, you're letting fanatics speak up, then we lose the deep, passionate ground. And if we bring religion into it, and I don't know who the people on the Palestinian side, but there's many imams in Israel. I've sat with somebody, and again, I don't know if I should say names on the camera, but who's a very senior imam in Rahat. But he's a Bedouin. But he said to me after a few minutes of talking, we men of religion, we can think about this conflict in a very different way. We can override all our pain and override all of this. And that the religious narrativization, if in the same way that Hamas used religion to produce the radicalization, if we can think in the faith aspect, I don't know if you agree with me, but I feel it very strongly that that's a huge something we need to bring Hashem, Allah. We need to bring the one true God that we all believe in. All of our texts have ways to look at it that we could look at the other side in quite negative ways, but you could also flip that around, as you quoted earlier, and see things very, very strongly as connections. And as you said, when Israel was in the land in the biblical text, there were always non-Jewish people. Some of them we had treaties with and were allies. Ger Toshav, we had the responsibility to look after them and care for them and worry about their well-being. They serve the same God, which you do. And there are ways for Muslims to look at their texts and see that Allah invited the Bani Israel into the land as long as we behave in certain ways.
Especially, Rabbi, the common ground between Judaism and Islam is really strong.
Very strong.
Very strong. I visited a synagogue, and I noticed when I wanted to enter to the prayer room, the big prayer room, that there is a washroom next to it, where Jews wash their hands before going to pray, which is a custom also by Muslims.
yeah.
We Muslims need also to wash our hands before we enter to the mosque and pray. This is something unique that is in common. It does not exist in other religions. The way we link our prayers to the sunset and the dawn, our fasting hours, the way we fast by not drinking or eating, so there is a lot of common ground, especially in the morals of the two religions, that can make us connect easily. When the political differences start disappearing, the religious common ground start to be more obvious. Now politics is using religion in a negative way. So religion is a victim of a certain political elites on the different sides that might try to use it as a source of justification of certain political agendas. But I think always religion will be a common ground. It connects us to the same God. It connects us to the same values. Most of the values in Islam were invented by Judaism. So not lying, not stealing, never killing. The value of the sanctity of life, human dignity, for example. All these values, they were brought to humanity by Judaism, and they continued and inherited by the other religions, including the Islam. Islam continued the same line of respecting these morals. So I see religion as a way to bring people together. Unfortunately, the voices of those religion leaders are still not heard. Unfortunately, voice of political Islam is more heard from the Muslim side, which is not really representing Islam. We are here sitting very close to the Kotel, very close to the Haram al-Sharif. And this area, I know how much it is important for everybody. I don't think that issues we are facing now of who enters, who doesn't enter, who prays, who doesn't pray, could be an issue in the future when the political challenges has disappeared. These religious difficulties come under pressure from the political circumstances and not the opposite.
I know that when Sadat made peace with Israel, one of the less known, it took me years to discover this. He went to the Al-Azhar University in Cairo and asked them, and they wrote a whole fatwa explaining why even the Dar al-Islam and Dar al-Harb, they could make peace, and they wrote a justification. I never knew that.
Yeah.
A lot of Muslims, I suppose, didn't even know that.
Yeah.
But certainly it's
I didn't know that.
Right. So a lot of people don't know that. I don't know how religious Sadat himself was, but it was very important to him that it's a religiously okay thing to do. I am sure, maybe I'm wrong, that someone in the University of Medina has allowed the United Arab Emirates to make peace with Israel and Bahrain. So I don't know what it would take, but I imagine, like I said, just that Hamas started, and even Hezbollah started as some mosques and some welfare and some this and that, but the religious captured the masses and then produced an ideology of violence. I just think there's a very important place for people on each side, the great rabbis and the great imams, to come together, and I think they'll find in many ways to find a lot of common ground to base peace on. I know from our perspective in Torah, as somebody who's not Jewish who keeps the Noachide law, is absolutely a place in the world to come, and they're called Ger Toshav. We're meant to support them in the land. That's there. And if the equivalent comes on the other side, then the religious leaders can say to all people, put aside this, that, and the other. The future we're going to build together is the way forward. That's what God wants. And, I just think it can be a force that can be generated for the good if we could find the same voice on both sides that can start to talk this way, that the people trust as real religious figures. So there's not all the mosques in Gaza run by the Muslim Brotherhood and the Hamas.
There is one phrase that maybe each Muslim, especially if he's a Muslim that does his prayers 5 times a day, a phrase that maybe he mentions more than 50 times a day, which is Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, the merciful. Mercy is one important value. Maybe the most important, because why it is there? We keep saying it. Okay, so this brings us to the current situation where there is a lot of pain. This pain and hard feelings, we need to be very careful, and it is obvious on both sides. Either it will go the wrong way into another wave of revenge, or we can take it on the good way. Forgiveness, to be merciful, is something of a value. Especially, I believe that if we Palestinians want to be loyal and respectful to those Palestinian kids who lost their life in Gaza, maybe to those kids who survived the war in Gaza, or even to those kids who have yet to be born, to resort to peace with Israel and guarantee a better future for them. This is the only way. Any other direction is a catastrophe, defining that more of our kids will face the same destiny. And we need to stop this. So I think the type of price that we both paid on the 7th of October and the war, we need to resort to a peace of no choice. Yes, we have resorted to certain levels of violence or a war of no choice, but then this is the only left choice for both of us, a peace of no choice.
We are about to enter the fastest development of humanity in history. We've already entered it, but it's just going to speed up. And, there's a big discussions happening in the world. Is AI going to take away all our jobs? Or could it get so sophisticated that it's going to kill us all because it's going to be more intelligent than we are? And it struck me, there's a lot of research, a lot of money being put into funding economic development, military development, entertainment, medicine. Like somebody I know, unfortunately, was diagnosed with a very severe cancer recently.
Yeah.
And one of the things the doctor said to him and his wife is, you've actually got a good chance to live. It's going to be difficult, lots of surgeries and procedures and chemotherapy for the next year. But 5 years ago, you had no chance. Would have told your wife you've got 6 weeks to live. That's what they would. And it struck me, there's money in there. And so people have found technological breakthroughs. The first person to be healed from a genetic disorder with a gene therapy has been done. People are incentivized. Laser technology is all just developed now. So in case Hezbollah fires drones, it's been done because there's incentives there. Is there a fund, and should there be a fund, to develop technologies that can help peace? And I know peace isn't in the mind, for sure, all that you've been saying. But I'll give you a tiny example. One of the horrible things an average Palestinian has to face across the West Bank is checkpoints. And Israel needs checkpoints because they can't have terrorists driving through. So now every Palestinian has to sit there waiting. Sometimes the Israelis are busy on an operation. They can't even man the checkpoints. So I'm sure you know this experience. You're stuck at a checkpoint for hours. Maybe you can't even get to your cousin's wedding in the next village. And the Israelis can't open it up because then Hamas could build a network there. And, so simple level, I'm sure we could develop a technology that can have automated checkpoints where maybe you travel between cities in the first few in driverless cars that have their own internal sensors. I'm just making up a solution, right? If there's weapons or anything, it lets the Palestinian police know. If they don't do anything, it lets the Israeli police know. Something like this, right? Put a fund up. In 3 years' time, we want an end to long lines of checkpoints. We want Palestinian freedom and movement with Israeli security, dignity, security. An example, small example. It starts to build trust. It starts to remove friction. You put a fund into a much bigger technology. How can you have scenarios where people can share the water supplies and electricity on the same grids, but it knows who to bill so that now everyone gets fair allocation? I'm coming up with a few simple scenarios. But then we know they're going to have more and more technologies, education in the schools, systems where people can partner and learn with each other, jobs for Palestinians who don't have to come into Israel to get jobs that can work. I'm just making stuff up for now. I'm sure more brilliant minds could come up with better and better solutions that could eventually, in 10 years' time, lead to being able to live in different borders. But like you described, you can have a Palestinian here who votes there and vice versa. But options that we can't currently think of. But surely the brain power, surely the innovative technologies. In the Arab world, I think the Palestinians are amongst the most educated and brilliant people. There's a lot of very educated and brilliant and innovative Israeli citizens and Jews around the world. there's money, there's funding, like where we're blocked from getting to the visions you're talking about now, where there's friction points, using the coming revolution and directing it and shaping it, even if we can't get there today, to make life better today. Build trust today, build opportunities so that if a kid in Gaza wants to have an Israeli friend and can't via their system, there's a technology that links them and no Palestinian police will find him there, and vice versa. Things that can start to generate, if you want to go online and start to see it from the other perspective. I feel that if we can make these breakthroughs, build the new world here, I have a feeling, as you said earlier, the world's eyes are on the Jewish people. We don't like it because it produced a lot of hatred for us. It's not nice for us that 70% of all UN resolutions are telling us we're not good enough. But on a deep level, maybe this is a Jewish perspective, but I feel this is that's because God is saying to us, you guys have to sort things out in this world, right? But I feel God put us back in this land with another people in the land, and we have to figure this out. But I think the way to do it is going to be innovative stuff with a divine imperative and an ingenuity and a desire to get to the dreams you're talking about. A desire that we see I see you, but every Palestinian would walk in front of me, and every Jew would walk in front of every Palestinian. We'd see each other as partners, not as enemies. That if we can sort this out here, every conflict in the world can be solved. I really think we have an obligation to do it, a responsibility to do it, and I think we can do it.
I agree. And definitely technology can help because it is smarter, as you have mentioned, and it will show us, bring some power in our hands. These tools are very important. Some people will put enough money into these peace technologies that will not only help us, but will help any other conflict, the whole world.
I'd love to spend more hours with you, and I'm sure we will spend more hours together.
Definitely.
But I want to just really thank you for spending the time. I know you've got a busy week work-wise and doing good-wise in the world, and I just hope there's more people like you, and I hope and dream of the day, and I pray that we live to see it together, and it should be very quick, where it's not just this conversation, but this is the way we're all thinking about each other. And, in our prophets, it talks about God says he doesn't want the whole world to be Jewish. He wants the whole world to come together, every single nation with its own identity and its own, come together as one, feel that we're one. And just like Yitzhak and Yishmael became one, so they were separate, different identities, but felt a connection. So we all come to and make God's world a holy place, a beautiful place, a peaceful place, and a place where we can live side by side and wonder how we were ever in conflict at all. Samer, thank you so much.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you so much.
And
we say, Inshallah, Be'ezrat Hashem.
Inshallah, Be'ezrat Hashem. Exactly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening. I hope this has been really thought-provoking for you and hopefully inspiring as well. If you like this sort of content, please remember to like, but more importantly, to subscribe and click on the notification button so you can get alerts when new content comes. Until then, until next time, God bless you all.